the idea of the 15-minute city has been hailed as one of the outstanding architectural contributions to human development. And it's already being looked at, being implemented in cities across the globe, from Paris to Portland to Milan. So the key question that we're going to be addressing today is, should we be bringing 15-minute cities to the UK? But before we get into all of that, I thought it might be helpful if we actually defined what a 15-minute city is, and maybe talked a little bit about why it's important. So, boom, start us off.
So it's really about focusing neighbourhoods and communities around cycling and walking, as far as I can tell, and moving away from that idea of car domination, and really providing the basic fundamental needs of what you need to live, to work, and I guess thrive as a community within 15 minutes of where you live.
I think here in Manchester, the Millennium Communities Initiative that came in around 2000, and you have New Islington over in East Manchester, arguably has that bone structure. It's got a park, it's got school, it's got local commercial amenities, it's got residential, and actually recognising the journey that New Islington has been on, I think it's been a pretty phenomenal success, and it has been founded on those very principles of the 20-minute neighbourhood, the compact neighbourhood, taking nothing away from Carlos Moreno and the fact that from 2016 it's been captured in this sort of phrase or terminology which has made it much more accessible and therefore easier to understand and easier to promote. So I do think that Manchester has actually adopted it and has delivered it.
The 15-minute city is so important, it really is. I think in terms of creating economic and environmentally resilient spaces, really putting green and blue infrastructure at the heart of the walking and cycling networks that you mentioned. It's more sustainable, it's more compact, it's more connected, greater density of development, minimising car journeys, reducing carbon emissions. It's all, fundamentally what we have to do.
Economic productivity is really important to levelling up. And a thing that struck me moving back to the northwest, only just recently, is like the amount of time that's spent in transit for people, and it's economically not that productive. So I think these principles about making sure you can access work and amenity within a short time frame via public transport or cycling or walking is really important foundation for economic productivity.
It's not kind of about keeping people just sort of trapped in their local neighbourhoods. It's about having good access to day-to-day things in your local neighbourhood, but also about having then good public transport links to other places, whether that's to other towns or the city centre, where you might come to do more kind of cultural leisure stuff. You might commute 3 days a week instead of 5. So I think I sort of see it as a series of really well-connected neighbourhoods. And I think if you visualise it like that, then it's much more, it's just as much outward-looking as it is inward-looking, which I think really helps to conceptualise it.
As we move away from the car, what do we do with these streets? And that's where you have an opportunity to create excellent cycle highways, but also more green space. So if you've got existing spaces in the cities which are lacking green, and you don't have as I said, the space to utilise to create new parks, can we look at these linear parks and boulevards and building on the Paris model there, I suppose. And then that ties into healthier spaces for people, and ultimately creating somewhere where people have a better quality of life.
We're accommodating movement by means of private vehicles in particular. That's pretty space hungry. And actually, if we can start to tighten up on the space that has been allocated to that, it then liberates significant portions of space for other things.
I was looking at the statistics. It's something like 2/3 of all trips are made by car. A quarter of those trips are like under 1 mile. So as you say, the resources and the land that can free up moving to this kind of concept of removing those car journeys is, I think, quite immense. And again, in terms of that sort of collectivism, equity, all that kind of stuff is a good thing for society.
I think there's an argument that people would say, well, I don't have the local services on my doorstep, I don't have the green space on my doorstep, therefore I need the car to get to somewhere that does. So I think it's a little bit chicken and egg. If you had greater investment within towns, within smaller cities, you'd have more of that kind of willingness to consider giving up the car. I'd say people in city centres, living in city centres, probably don't have a car anyway, perhaps. And maybe Ancoats, you know, in terms of the community, there'd be less concern around having a more walkable environment.
I think it's a huge opportunity for the towns, isn't it, in Greater Manchester, to establish their own identity around that sort of 15-20 minute neighbourhood concept, bring more residential back into the towns, more of a mix of uses. I mean, Altrincham, where I live, has invested a lot in local services, so it's brought, you know, GP surgeries, health wellbeing, library, new hospital, all of those things back into the town centre, or, you know, redevelop them. And so you have all those things on your doorstep, but you still have really good access into the city centre, and I think that's a huge opportunity for all of our towns, which have all been struggling over the last 10, 20 years.
I think it's important for different locations to provide an offer that means that people don't have to make those unnecessary journeys that you talk about to go and get a pint of milk or whatever. But it's also important that places have their own identity and there's connectivity that bring new people into the area, because that does help with social cohesion and things like that.
I think going on that, there's always a benefit in terms of, there's always a district centre, usually sometimes around a train station or even a bus station or something like that, and I think the more you can do to accelerate that into being somewhere where people want to be, because that's already there. There'll always be a village hall or something like that. The more we can push that, I think the more it will push that idea that somebody might want to leave their bike at the station rather than leaving their bike driving all the way down the A56 through some cones. I think it's sort of working with what we've got to then move that paradigm shift the right way.
How do we ensure that these don't become insulated, you know, neighbourhoods just for the wealthy?
Well, as a local authority person, obviously kind of equity is kind of a pretty important principle, and certainly I think, you know, providing spaces for kind of events, you know, things people can participate in that don't require lots of cash. You know, the opportunity to attend a festival or an event that's either cheap or doesn't have a charge, that gives people the opportunity to participate in their community and be part of something in their community. So we put the, you know, what goes on in the community as a really important factor. It's not just about buying things in town centres.
I think that 15-minute cities are kind of a way of offering social cohesion. The narrative has to be community focused and community driven to understand what existing communities are there, their issues, the constraints of the sites, those kind of things. And only then can we really design fully inclusive spaces where you do have affordable housing and also better access to green space, to open space.
It's not about mobility necessarily, it's about access, and the idea that in the broader sense, you know, these are spaces which are accessible and affordable for everybody. To create this, you know, this idea that everyone from whatever walk of life you come from, whether you're, you know, poor or rich or educated or not, you can be in one of these spaces. And, you know, Ancoats is a great example. I totally agree with that. But maybe the slight downside of Ancoats is about the gentrification of it all. And from a regeneration perspective, you know, we need to sort of be trying to achieve this concept in a way which supports existing communities and gives them a sense of ownership.
I often think we still perhaps don't promote the value of living within what we'd call the 15-minute communities in terms of it's something that offers you a good lifestyle. When I'm looking for a house, you know, the size of the bloody kitchen, or whether it's got a kind of a lawn where the kids can play on swings, and, you know, how big the spare bedroom for a visiting auntie is utterly secondary to where the place is. I know there were some articles over the weekend, I think, around people during the pandemic who'd moved out of London and thought, oh, we'll live in these beautiful kind of places in the Cotswolds, find themselves completely isolated and cut off, and all the things they enjoyed in their 15-minute community no longer exist. They've just got some rural pub where people don't really like them. And it's like, I've got to get back to London. And it's because they've not calculated the value of what they had when they were there.
What is one thing we can be doing to enable a 15-minute city?
We can only do what's in the red line that Nick talked about. So I think the politics of large-scale public sector intervention into public transport is expensive and time-consuming. What we can do, the development community, I think, is try and lay some of the foundations to make the politics a bit easier in the future. So things like improving amenity for cyclists, small scale intervention, but that something's very important, so you feel a bit more encouraged to take your chances down the A56. And I think we need to raise the bar on that, really, the development community. I think we could do better.
From a landscape community, landscape profession, I think we need to do better as well. I think that we need to bang on about key principles for each scheme that we deliver on. I think we really need to push clients, whether they're local councils or developers, really extol the virtues of landscape and good landscape architecture, good urban design, placemaking, networks of GBI, and climate change resilience. Fundamental.
From my perspective as a developer, the really important part is then the collaboration and the partnership and working out how we can achieve things beyond a red line, making the use of the different skills, resources, powers that different organisations have, public and private sector, because that's how we're going to achieve this on that strategic scale.
I think if government could create a biodiversity fund at scale, devolved to mayoral combined authorities, where when I've got big redevelopment schemes which are under constant pressure because of mass inflation across the built environment sector, that could come in and put specific features in that are ring-fenced to deliver, because at the moment, I'm clinging on to as much of the green infrastructure we've put in our levelling up bids, our town centre projects, but the cost pressures are just constant at the moment, and you don't want to lose them, but ultimately, they can become sitting ducks. And I think if you invest the right level and in the right level of biodiversity from the start on schemes, they will stand the test of time. But I think it would make a significant difference to schemes if we had some actual subsidy money to help deliver biodiversity.
I think from a local government perspective, it's clarity, I think. So one of the things that we can do is perhaps be a bit clearer with our planning policies, zoning policies, to encourage this development which people are saying that they want, the clients want it, so I think that's beholden on us, and basing it around things like energy efficiency and being clear on how we want the homes of the future to be built, I think is a key thing for local government.